No one knocks on an airlock from the outside. Not if they want to live. Ethan Walker had repeated that rule to every rookie engineer who passed through Kestrel 9 station. And after 11 years working the graveyard shift at the edge of mapped space, he believed it. The station drifted nearly 300,000 miles beyond the nearest shipping corridor, a lonely steel skeleton suspended against an endless ocean of stars. Most nights were predictable. Diagnostics, maintenance reports, coffee that tasted vaguely like burnt plastic, the distant hum of reactors older than some planetary governments. Nothing exciting ever happened on Kestrel 9, which was exactly why Ethan liked it. The amber maintenance lights cast long shadows across Corridor C as he pushed a service cart toward Airlock Section 17. The station's environmental systems had flagged a pressure imbalance somewhere in the outer maintenance ring. Probably another aging seal. Probably another hour spent crawling through access shafts with a wrench in one hand and a flashlight in the other. Above him, ventilation fans exhaled a low mechanical sigh. Beneath his boots, the deck plating vibrated with the steady heartbeat of fusion generators buried deep inside the station's core. Everything sounded normal. Everything felt normal. Then he heard it. Knock. Ethan stopped walking. The sound had been faint. So faint he almost convinced himself it wasn't real. He glanced around the empty corridor. Nobody. The nearest crew member was 3 decks away running cargo inventory. The station's night cycle had already begun. Most residents were asleep. He waited. The silence returned. Just the distant rumble of machinery. Ethan shook his head and continued forward. Stress did strange things during 12-hour shifts. He had probably heard a loose panel shifting with the station's rotation. Nothing more. Then it came again. Knock. Knock. This time he froze completely. 3 soft impacts against metal. Deliberate. Rhythmic. Human. A chill moved across the back of his neck. The sound had come from Airlock 17. He stared toward the sealed hatch at the far end of the corridor. Its circular bulkhead door remained closed, illuminated by a strip of pale white emergency lighting. No alarms flashed. No warning indicators appeared. No incoming vessel had requested docking clearance. According to every sensor aboard Kestrel 9, there was absolutely nothing outside that airlock. Ethan slowly set his toolbox down. Okay, he muttered. That's new. He approached the control panel beside the hatch. The display showed vacuum conditions beyond the outer door. External temperature, minus 247 degrees Fahrenheit. Radiation levels nominal. Motion detection, none. He tapped the sensor screen twice. Same readings. The station AI responded instantly. Airlock 17 status unchanged. The calm synthetic voice reported. No registered activity detected. Ethan frowned. Run an external scan. A brief pause followed. Scan complete. No vessels. No debris fields. No life signatures detected within 1,000 yards. He stared at the report. Then the knocking returned. Knock. 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 Louder now. Close enough that he felt the vibrations through the metal railing beneath his hand. Every instinct told him that what he was hearing was impossible. Outside that door existed only vacuum and darkness stretching for billions of miles. Nothing should have survived there. Nothing should have been standing there. Yet someone, or something, was asking to be let in. The corridor suddenly felt colder. The shadows longer. Ethan looked toward the observation window built into the secondary inspection chamber. Beyond the reinforced glass waited only blackness sprinkled with distant starlight. But for the briefest moment, he thought he saw movement. A pale shape. Motionless. Watching. Then the station lights flickered once. When they stabilized, the shape was gone. The knocking stopped. Silence swallowed the corridor. Ethan swallowed hard and stared at the emergency release controls. Every procedure manual in existence said he should call security and seal the section. Instead, his hand moved toward the activation panel. Because deep inside, beneath training and regulations and common sense, one thought refused to leave him. Someone had knocked, and someone had expected an answer. The emergency release cover clicked open beneath Ethan's thumb. A small sound, barely louder than a breath. Yet it seemed to echo through the entire corridor. The control panel bathed his face in pale blue light as warning text scrolled across the display. External chamber depressurized. No registered docking authorization. Manual override required. He hesitated for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for common sense to argue its case. Then he entered his authorization code. Hydraulic locks disengaged with a deep metallic clunk. Somewhere inside the station walls, motors awakened. Airlock 17 began its cycle. Ethan watched through the reinforced inspection window as the outer chamber illuminated. White lights flickered across steel flooring coated in a thin layer of frost. Empty. At first glance, there was nothing there. No ship, no cargo pod, no maintenance drone. Just an empty chamber exposed moments ago to open space. Ethan frowned. You have got to be kidding me. Then he noticed the shape near the far wall. Small, curled against the metal deck. Motionless beneath a silver emergency blanket. His pulse quickened. The chamber pressure equalized. Green indicators appeared one after another across the console. Safe atmosphere established. Internal access authorized. Ethan grabbed the emergency medical kit mounted beside the hatch. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Cold air spilled into the corridor. Not dangerous, just enough to carry the scent of recycled oxygen and frozen metal. He stepped inside. The chamber felt strangely quiet. Even the station's distant machinery seemed muted here. His boots echoed softly against the deck plating as he approached the figure. 20 feet. 15. 10. The blanket shifted slightly. Ethan stopped. Whoever lay beneath it was alive. Barely. He knelt beside the figure and carefully pulled back one corner of the reflective material. For a moment, he simply stared. The girl appeared no older than her early 20s by human standards. Her skin carried a faint silver blue hue unlike any species he recognized immediately. White hair spilled across the floor like frost-covered silk. Tiny crystals of ice still clung to several strands. Her breathing was shallow but steady. More surprising was her clothing. It was simple, gray, functional, the kind issued to workers or passengers aboard civilian transport vessels. Nothing expensive, nothing remarkable. Yet attached to one sleeve was a bright orange classification tag. Ethan turned it toward the light. The words printed across the surface made his stomach tighten. Biological waste. Disposal authorization approved. He read it twice. Then a third time. No, he said quietly. That cannot be right. The girl stirred. Her eyelashes fluttered. For one brief second, violet eyes opened halfway. Confused. Frightened. Searching. They met his. Then closed again. Ethan felt something twist inside his chest. He had worked enough years on frontier stations to understand what happened when paperwork became more important than people. He had seen corporations abandon settlements. He had seen cargo crews forgotten after budget cuts. But this felt different. Personal. Deliberate. He removed the tag from her sleeve and slipped it into his pocket. The station AI spoke overhead. Unidentified life form detected. Reporting procedure available. Ethan looked toward the nearest speaker. Do not file anything. Please clarify. Private medical observation. A brief pause followed. Acknowledged. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then he carefully lifted the unconscious girl into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Outside the airlock, the corridor lights glowed warm amber against the darkness. Somewhere beyond the station hull, countless stars burned silently. And for the first time since arriving at Kestrel, 9-11 years earlier, Ethan had the unmistakable feeling that his ordinary life had just ended. People often reveal who they are when they wake up afraid. Ethan learned that lesson less than an hour later. The station infirmary occupied a quiet corner of Deck 4, far from cargo traffic and even farther from curious crew members. Most nights it sat empty. A few diagnostic beds, sterile white walls, soft blue monitor lights, the faint scent of antiseptic drifting through recycled air. Ethan had placed the girl in the recovery room and connected basic medical scanners before returning to finish emergency paperwork that deliberately omitted certain details. By the time he came back, the station clock read 2:17 a.m. The room looked unchanged. The scanner hummed quietly beside the bed. A thermal blanket covered the sleeping figure. Everything appeared normal. Then Ethan noticed the empty bed. He stopped in the doorway. The blanket lay folded on the mattress. The monitoring leads had been disconnected with surprising precision. Not ripped away. Removed carefully. The room was silent. Too silent. Ethan slowly raised both hands. Okay, he said calmly. You are awake. No answer came. He glanced toward the storage cabinets lining the rear wall. One door stood slightly open. I brought coffee, he added. Well, technically it is station coffee, so calling it coffee might be generous. A pause followed. Then a voice emerged from the shadows. Soft. Cautious. Who are you? Ethan almost smiled. At least she was talking. Ethan Walker. Maintenance engineer. Human. owner of extremely bad coffee. The cabinet door opened another inch. Violet eyes appeared first, watching him carefully, measuring him. Where am I? She asked. Kestrel, 9 station. He slowly set a steaming paper cup on the nearby table. You were unconscious. Her gaze narrowed immediately. How long? About 40 minutes. The answer seemed to relax her slightly. Only slightly. She stepped into view. Standing now, she appeared taller than he expected, graceful despite obvious exhaustion. The silver-blue tone of her skin shimmered faintly beneath the medical room lights. Her white hair fell loosely around her shoulders. She looked toward the exit, then toward the ventilation shaft, then toward the emergency equipment mounted beside the door. Ethan noticed everything. Escape routes. She was cataloging them automatically. You think I am dangerous, she said. No. Ethan pulled a chair backward and sat down. I think you were scared. Her expression hardened instantly. I am not scared. Sure. You do not believe me. Not really. To his surprise, she seemed uncertain how to respond. Most frightened people expected arguments, defensiveness, suspicion. Instead, Ethan simply took a sip from his coffee. The silence stretched between them. Finally, her eyes settled on the orange identification tag resting on the table. Ethan had forgotten to put it away. The moment she saw it, something changed. Her face lost all color. Where did you get that? She whispered. It was attached to your sleeve. She crossed the room immediately and snatched it from the table. Her hands trembled. Not dramatically, just enough for Ethan to notice. She stared at the printed words for several long seconds before crumpling the tag inside her fist. You should not have opened the airlock, she said quietly. Probably true. You should have ignored the knocking. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Also probably true. Her eyes met his again. Deep violet. Full of secrets. Then why did you answer? Ethan thought about it, then shrugged. Because somebody knocked. For the first time since waking, her expression cracked. Only slightly. A flicker of confusion. As though the answer made less sense than the mystery itself. Then her gaze drifted toward the station window, overlooking the stars. And very softly, almost too quietly to hear, she said, that is exactly why they wanted me gone. The next 24 hours passed beneath a blanket of carefully managed lies. Ethan had never considered himself a particularly talented liar. He was an engineer. Engineers solve problems by fixing broken things, not by inventing stories. Unfortunately, Kestrel, 9 suddenly required both. Morning cycle arrived with its usual chorus of station activity. Cargo elevators rumbled between decks. Docking announcements echoed through overhead speakers. Commuter shuttles arrived and departed according to schedules that rarely changed. To everyone else aboard the station, it was another ordinary day at the edge of civilization. Hidden 3 decks below the primary maintenance ring, it was anything but ordinary. Ethan led the girl through a narrow service corridor illuminated by dim orange utility lights. Exposed pipes lined the ceiling. Warm air drifted from reactor conduits behind reinforced bulkheads. The farther they walked, the older the station appeared. Paint faded. Labels peeled away. The polished public areas disappeared entirely. Nobody comes down here, she asked. Her voice sounded stronger than it had in the infirmary. Only engineers. Ethan pointed ahead, which means most sane people avoid it. To his surprise, she almost smiled. Almost. The maintenance sector occupied a forgotten corner of Deck 9 originally built during the station's first construction phase. Over decades of upgrades and expansions, newer sections had swallowed the old infrastructure. What remained was a maze of access tunnels, repair bays, storage rooms, and equipment nobody had touched in years. Ethan stopped before a heavy steel door marked Auxiliary Power Control. He entered an override code. The lock clicked open. Inside waited a modest room containing workbenches, spare components, diagnostic consoles, and a small sleeping area tucked behind equipment cabinets. The air smelled faintly of machine oil and warm electronics. Welcome to my kingdom, Ethan said. The girl slowly turned in a circle. Her eyes studied every corner, every camera location, every emergency exit. Ethan noticed she still evaluated spaces like someone expecting danger. You live here? She asked. Sometimes. That does not answer the question. Then yes. She looked genuinely confused. You choose this. Ethan shrugged. Closer to the equipment. Less noise. Better coffee machine. The coffee machine is broken. He blinked. You noticed that? The thermal regulator is failing. She pointed toward the machine. There is residue buildup inside the heating assembly. Ethan stared, then laughed. You figured that out from across the room? The smell. For the first time, curiosity replaced some of the caution in her eyes. Ethan found himself smiling despite everything. Several hours later, he returned carrying lunch containers from the station cafeteria. The room was quiet. The girl sat cross-legged beside an open maintenance terminal studying engineering schematics displayed across the screen. Ethan stopped. You know those files are encrypted? Not very well. That is slightly concerning. She accepted the food container without looking away from the display. Your station power grid is inefficient. Ethan nearly dropped his own lunch. Excuse me. 12% energy loss during transfer cycles. She tapped several highlighted sections on the screen. These routing pathways were designed for expansion that never occurred. Ethan slowly sat down. Most visiting specialists needed days to understand the station's aging infrastructure. She had been here less than a day. Who are you? He asked quietly. The question lingered between them. The glow from the terminal reflected in her violet eyes. For a moment, he thought she might answer honestly. Instead, she lowered her gaze. My name is Lyra. That is not what I asked. Silence returned. Somewhere beyond the wall, ancient machinery hummed steadily. Finally, Lyra spoke. If people discover I am here, they will ask questions. Probably. And if they ask the wrong questions, someone will come looking. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Who? Her expression changed again. The curiosity vanished. The fear returned. Not fear for herself. Fear of something else. Something larger. Then she looked toward the station's exterior schematics displayed on the screen and whispered, People who already think I disappeared. 3 days passed before Lyra accidentally broke something. Ethan would remember the moment for reasons that had nothing to do with the damaged object itself. The station maintenance room had settled into an uneasy routine. During daylight cycles, Ethan handled repair assignments across Kestrel 9 while Lyra remained hidden below Deck 9. During evening hours, they shared meals, reviewed diagnostic reports, and occasionally argued about engineering decisions neither was willing to surrender. The room no longer felt quite as small as it had during her first night. Familiarity had softened some of its sharp edges. The old ventilation system rattled every 17 minutes. The overhead light nearest the door flickered whenever the station entered a power redistribution cycle. The coffee machine remained stubbornly broken despite Ethan's repeated promises to repair it. Lyra had noticed all of it. She noticed everything. That evening, Ethan returned carrying a cardboard box filled with replacement circuit boards. Warm air drifted through the maintenance bay. Somewhere beyond the bulkheads, cargo transport engines vibrated softly through the station structure. Lyra sat at the workbench studying technical manuals displayed across a portable screen. For the first time since arriving, she appeared almost relaxed. Almost. Ethan placed the box beside the table. Good news. She glanced up. The coffee machine exploded? That would not be good news. For everyone else aboard the station, it might be. He laughed despite himself and began sorting equipment. A few minutes later, Lyra reached for a ceramic mug sitting near the edge of the workbench. Her sleeve caught the handle. The cup tipped sideways. Time seemed to slow. The mug struck the floor. Crack. Porcelain scattered across the deck. Silence followed. Ethan looked down at the broken pieces. Then toward Lyra. She had frozen completely. The color drained from her face. Her shoulders tightened. Her breathing stopped. Ethan blinked in confusion. It is just a cup. She did not answer. Her eyes remained fixed on the shattered fragments. Lyra. Still nothing. For several long seconds, she stood motionless. Waiting. Expecting. Ethan suddenly recognized the expression. Not guilt. Not embarrassment. Anticipation. The kind people carried when they expected consequences. Hey. He crouched beside the broken pieces. Nobody died. She stared. Ethan collected several fragments and dropped them into a recycling bin. Actually, this might be the most productive thing that mug ever accomplished. You are not angry. The question sounded genuine. Ethan paused. Why would I be angry? I damaged your property. It was a $5 mug. I still damaged it. Ethan leaned against the workbench. Lyra, I work around machinery that costs millions of credits. Yesterday, somebody accidentally launched a maintenance drone into a fuel container. Her eyes widened slightly. What happened? Paperwork. For a moment, she simply looked at him. Then something unexpected happened. She laughed. The sound lasted only a second. Soft. Quick. Almost surprised to exist. But it transformed the entire room. Ethan found himself smiling before he realized it. The laughter faded. Yet some invisible barrier seemed to fade with it. Later that night, they sat near the observation window, overlooking the stars. Neither spoke much. They simply watched distant lights drift across the darkness. After a while, Lyra quietly asked, "Humans always forgive mistakes this easily?" Ethan shook his head. "Not always." "Then why forgive mine?" He considered the question carefully. Finally, he answered without looking away from the stars. "Because everybody deserves a place where breaking a cup is only breaking a cup." Beside him, Lyra became very still. Outside the glass, distant starlight reflected across her violet eyes. And for the first time since arriving on Kestrel 9, she looked less like someone hiding from the galaxy and more like someone beginning to believe she might belong somewhere inside it. The truth arrived on a quiet night wrapped in the glow of diagnostic screens and the smell of overheated circuitry. Ethan had spent most of the evening replacing a failing power regulator deep inside the maintenance sector. By the time he returned to the workshop, station time had passed midnight. The room was dim except for the blue light of a terminal near the far wall. Lyra sat alone before it. She was not reading this time. She was simply staring at a blank display. The untouched dinner tray beside her had gone cold hours ago. Ethan immediately knew something was wrong. "You skipped food," he said as he set down his toolbox. "That is usually a bad sign." Lyra did not look up. "Do humans always notice everything?" "Not everything." He pulled out a chair. "Just the important parts." Silence settled between them. Outside the station hull, distant stars drifted across the observation window like scattered diamonds. The ventilation system released a slow breath overhead. Somewhere below Deck 9, ancient pumps continued their endless rhythm. Finally, Lyra spoke. "When I was young, my tutors taught me how to speak 7 diplomatic languages before my 12th cycle." Ethan waited quietly. "They taught negotiation theory, political strategy, economic forecasting, interstellar law." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "They taught me how to lead people I had never met." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Sounds like a lot of responsibility." A faint smile appeared and vanished. Responsibility was the purpose. For several seconds, neither moved. Then she looked directly at him. "I was not born into an ordinary family." Ethan nodded once. "I figured that much out. My full name is Lyra Valeris." The name seemed to carry weight even inside the small maintenance room. The Valeris Consortium governs trade routes across 43 inhabited systems. Ethan blinked. Even living on the frontier, he recognized the name immediately. Entire planetary economies depended upon consortium transport networks. "You are connected to them?" Lyra laughed softly. There was no humor in it. "Connected?" She lowered her gaze. "I was supposed to inherit part of it." Ethan stared. Suddenly 100 small details made sense. The advanced technical knowledge, the education, the way she analyzed every room, every conversation, every possibility. "What happened?" he asked quietly. The answer took time. 5 years ago, researchers discovered something buried beneath an abandoned colony world. Her voice became distant. "Careful. An ancient navigation framework. Older than any known civilization." Ethan frowned. "Ancient technology? Not a weapon." She shook her head immediately. "A map." The word hung in the air. "A map to what?" Lyra turned toward the stars beyond the observation glass. "Nobody knows." The blue glow reflected across her silver-blue skin. But every major government wanted access to it. Every corporation. Every alliance. Ethan suddenly understood where this story was leading. "And your family controlled it." She nodded. "Eventually." Her expression darkened. "Then they realized I could access parts of the framework that nobody else could." "Why?" Lyra hesitated. "Because the system responds to specific genetic markers." Ethan exhaled slowly. "So you became valuable." For a while. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Until people decided ownership was easier than trust." The room felt colder somehow. Ethan remembered the orange disposal tag, the fear in her eyes, the knocking beyond the airlock. Suddenly those memories connected into a larger picture. Lyra was never discarded because she lacked value. She had been discarded because she possessed too much of it. Then she reached into her pocket and carefully placed a small metallic device onto the table. Its surface shimmered with unfamiliar symbols. The instant it touched the workbench, every light in the room flickered once. And for the first time since meeting her, Ethan realized someone might already know exactly where she was. The first warning arrived 12 hours later disguised as an ordinary transmission request. Ethan was halfway through a diagnostic inspection on Deck 3 when every display panel around him flashed the same notification. Incoming priority vessel. Clearance request pending. He frowned. Kestrel 9 rarely received priority traffic. Most ships passing through the sector were cargo haulers, prospecting crews, or maintenance contractors. Nobody important visited the station. That was one of its defining features. The notification disappeared before he could investigate further. By the time his shift ended, curiosity had already transformed into unease. He returned to the maintenance sector carrying 2 dinner containers and found Lyra standing motionless beside the observation window. She did not turn around when he entered. The stars reflected across the glass before her. "You saw it too," she said quietly. Ethan set the food down. "The incoming vessel?" Lyra nodded. "How large?" "According to station traffic control, about 800 feet. For the first time, she looked genuinely alarmed. "That is not a transport." Ethan crossed the room. "What is it?" Her answer came immediately. "Search capacity." The words settled heavily between them. Ethan glanced toward the metallic device resting on the workbench. Since revealing it the previous evening, neither of them had touched it. Yet somehow the room always seemed aware of its presence. "You think they found the signal?" "Eventually, everyone finds the signal." Her voice carried no drama, only certainty. Ethan folded his arms. "Then why keep it?" Lyra stared at the stars beyond the glass. "Because if the wrong people control what it unlocks, entire worlds become property." Silence followed. The station lights dimmed briefly as external docking systems activated. Somewhere far above, massive clamps prepared to receive an arriving vessel. Ethan watched her expression carefully. "How long have you been running?" She hesitated. "Almost 2 years." The answer struck him harder than expected. 2 years. 2 years without trusting anyone. 2 years moving between stations, ships, colonies, and shadows. 2 years wondering who might appear next. Suddenly, the frightened girl at the airlock felt much older than she looked. A station-wide announcement interrupted his thoughts. "Attention, all personnel. Priority customs inspection will commence upon arrival of authorized security representatives." Ethan frowned. Customs inspections almost never happen this far from regulated space. Lyra slowly closed her eyes. "It has started. Maybe it is routine." She looked at him. Not angry, not dismissive, simply sad. "You do not believe that?" Ethan did not answer. Because he did not. An hour later, security officers appeared throughout the station. Nothing dramatic. No alarms. No emergency declarations. Just additional personnel asking polite questions and reviewing identification records. Yet every corridor suddenly felt smaller. Every camera seemed more noticeable. By midnight, Ethan received a direct message requesting his presence at administration the following morning. The reason listed beneath the appointment made his stomach tighten. Personnel review regarding unregistered activity near Airlock 17. He read the message twice. Then a third time. Across the room, Lyra understood immediately. They found the entry logs. Ethan nodded slowly. "Looks that way." The silence that followed felt different from previous silences. Heavier. More final. Lyra lowered her gaze. "You should tell them the truth." Ethan laughed once. "Not because anything was funny." "Which truth?" "That you found me." And then, she did not answer, because they both knew what came after that. Eventually she whispered, "You would be safe." Ethan walked to the observation window and stared into the darkness beyond the station. Hundreds of distant stars burned silently across the void. Finally, he spoke without turning around. "Funny thing about safety." Lyra looked up. "What?" Ethan watched the arriving vessel appear as a tiny silver point against the blackness. "Sometimes it costs more than I am willing to pay." Morning arrived beneath a sky that did not exist. Kestrel 9 had no sunrise, only programmed lighting cycles that slowly brightened the station corridors according to schedules written decades earlier. Yet somehow the station felt different when Ethan stepped onto Deck 1. The air seemed tighter, conversations quieter. Every screen displayed docking information for the newly arrived vessel. Every security checkpoint carried additional personnel. Nobody explained why. Nobody needed to. People sensed significance the same way sailors sense storms. Administration occupied the highest level of the station, a polished section of glass and steel far removed from the aging maintenance decks below. Ethan sat across from Station Director Hallbrook inside a conference room overlooking the docking ring. The older man studied a data tablet while sunlight simulations glowed through the panoramic windows. You have worked here 11 years, Holbrook said. Correct. No disciplinary issues. Correct. Reliable performance evaluations. Ethan nodded. Usually. The director almost smiled. Then he rotated the tablet around. Airlock 17 appeared on the screen. Timestamps. Access logs. Authorization records. Every decision Ethan had made that night displayed in perfect detail. Tell me what happened. Ethan looked at the information quietly. Across the room, climate controls whispered through hidden vents. Somewhere beyond the windows, hundreds of vessels drifted through the docking network. Ordinary life continued. Waiting. Ethan finally leaned back in his chair. I heard knocking. Holbrook blinked. Knocking. That is the truth. For several seconds the director simply stared. Then he sighed. You know there are people aboard the inspection vessel asking similar questions. Ethan did not respond. Important. People. I figured. Holbrook folded his hands. They are looking for someone. Silence followed. The director watched him carefully. Ethan recognized the opportunity being offered. An exit. A simple path back towards safety. He only needed to speak one name. Instead he stood. If we are done here, I have maintenance work waiting. Holbrook stared at him for several long seconds. Then unexpectedly nodded. Get out of my office. Ethan left without another word. 40 minutes later, every alarm aboard Kestrel 9 suddenly fell silent. Not activated. Silenced. Entire sections of the station froze in perfect stillness. Cargo operations paused. Docking announcements ceased. Even background music vanished. The absence of sound felt louder than any warning siren. Personnel emerged from offices and corridors, looking around, confused, waiting. Then the external observation screens activated simultaneously. Ethan stopped walking. Hundreds of people across the station stopped with him. Beyond the transparent hull panels hung not one vessel, but an entire formation. Sleek silver ships stretched across the darkness in perfect alignment. Dozens of them, perhaps more. Their polished surfaces reflected starlight like liquid metal. Nobody spoke. The sight explained everything. This was not a customs inspection. It never had been. A station-wide transmission suddenly appeared on every display. An unfamiliar symbol rotated slowly above a field of deep blue light. Ethan recognized it immediately. He had seen the same emblem etched onto the metallic device resting in the maintenance room. Lyra. His communicator vibrated. Once. Twice. 3 times. A private channel request. Ethan accepted instantly. Her voice arrived through static. Calm. Clear. Different somehow. You should come to Docking Bay 1. He started walking before answering. What happened? A brief pause followed. Then Lyra laughed softly. Not the nervous laugh from weeks ago. Not the frightened voice from the airlock. Something steadier. Stronger. The truth finally caught up with me. The connection ended. Ethan reached the docking bay 10 minutes later and stopped in the doorway. The entire chamber stood silent. Security personnel. Station administrators. Visitors from the Silver Fleet. All waiting. At the center of the platform stood Lyra. Her simple gray clothing was gone. In its place, she wore a dark ceremonial uniform marked with silver patterns that shimmered beneath the bay lights. Yet it was not the uniform that stunned him. It was everyone else's reaction. Because every person in the room stood when she entered. Every single one. The silence lasted longer than any speech. Ethan remained near the entrance of Docking Bay 1 while hundreds of eyes followed Lyra across the platform. Representatives from the Silver Fleet stood in formal rows. Station officials waited beside them. Even Director Holbrook looked slightly overwhelmed by the scale of what had arrived at Kestrel 9. Yet none of them commanded the room. Only her. Lyra walked forward with calm confidence. But Ethan noticed something no one else seemed to see. She still carried the same habit she had shown during her first days in the maintenance sector. Her eyes briefly measured every exit, every corridor, every possibility. Some instincts survived every title. A tall, gray-haired diplomat stepped forward and offered a formal greeting. The words echoed through the docking chamber. Ethan understood only fragments of the language, but the respect required no translation. When the diplomat finished speaking, Lyra answered calmly. No anger, no triumph, no demand for punishment or revenge. She simply spoke about responsibility, about choices, about futures built on trust rather than ownership. The room listened. Every word carried weight. Ethan found himself smiling. Not because she had become powerful. She had always been powerful. The difference was that she no longer seemed afraid of it. The ceremony continued for nearly an hour. Recognition statements. Administrative confirmations. Legal declarations transmitted across dozens of star systems. Most of it blurred together. Eventually, the crowd began to disperse. Officials returned to work. Security teams withdrew. Docking crews resumed operations. Life slowly reclaimed the station. Ethan slipped away before anyone could stop him. By evening, he was back where he belonged. Deck 9. The maintenance sector. Warm ventilation air drifted through familiar corridors. Old machinery hummed inside the walls. The broken coffee machine still sat exactly where it always had. Somehow that made him laugh. He spent several hours repairing a damaged power relay and convincing himself that nothing had really changed. The station remained the station. He remained an engineer. Tomorrow would bring another maintenance schedule, another list of repairs, another ordinary shift. That thought survived until he heard the knock. 3 soft taps against the workshop door. Ethan froze, then shook his head. Of course. He crossed the room and opened the door. Lyra stood in the corridor. The elaborate ceremonial uniform was gone. She wore simple travel clothing again. Silver blue skin, white hair, violet eyes reflecting the amber maintenance lights. Familiar, humanly familiar. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan noticed the small case in her hand. "What is that?" he asked. "A gift. Should I be worried?" "Probably." He smiled. "That sounds expensive." "Actually, it is a replacement coffee machine." Ethan stared. "You crossed half the station for that." "No." A faint smile touched her lips. "I crossed half the galaxy." The answer lingered between them. Warm. Honest. The maintenance room suddenly felt very quiet. Finally, Ethan stepped aside. "Well," he said, "you should probably come in." Lyra entered without hesitation, as though she had done it 1,000 times. Outside the observation window, stars drifted slowly across the darkness. Inside the workshop, nothing looked extraordinary. Old tools, spare parts, worn workbenches, a place forgotten by almost everyone. Yet it was the first place in years where Lyra had not been treated as property, leverage, or responsibility. Just a person. Hours later, after conversations neither of them would fully remember, Ethan found himself standing beside the observation glass once more. The station lights reflected softly across the window. Beyond it stretched the endless galaxy. Vast, complicated, beautiful. Beside him stood someone who could command fleets and influence worlds. Yet she had returned to a forgotten maintenance deck because one engineer had answered a knock in the dark. Neither spoke for a long time. They simply watched the stars together. And for the first time in many years, Lyra did not seem to be searching for a place to belong. She had already found one.